For today's episode, we're going to put this under the why hasn't somebody else thought of that file. And this especially goes out to you guys out there that like to modify your gearboxes and put heavier springs in it in order to try to up your velocity on your airsoft gun. The problem is, beyond the obvious fact that it puts more stress on the gearbox and the motor, but beyond that, it also takes more power from your battery in order to drive that gearbox all the way through its cycle. The problem is that sooner or later your battery's going to run out of juice and not have enough power to run it all the way through, and most of the time it'll lock back with the piston almost like 99% back, and it just doesn't have enough power to complete it through the cycle. Now, the first sign that something's wrong with your gun is you'll be pulling the trigger and nothing's happening with the gun. You might hear a slight buzzing noise coming from the motor, and if it's going on for a long time, you may feel the grip start to heat up from the fact that the motor is not able to drive itself through its cycle and cool itself off. If you've ever disassembled an airsoft gun that's having this problem, you notice that you could see the piston through the little window in the back of the gearbox. Normally when you would look at it, you could actually see the springs inside of that little window, but if you could actually see through the gearbox like this clear one, you could see that the piston is stuck back in its rearward position. Now, the solution for this is obviously put a new battery in the gun, pull the trigger and drive it through its cycle and reset the gearbox. The problem is that when you have these modified springs in the gearboxes, there may not be enough power or enough torque in your motor to drive this all the way through its cycle when it's starting in the 99% compressed state like this. So what do you do in that case? Up until recently, the only solution I had for this kind of situation was to disassemble the airsoft gun, remove the gearbox from it, disassemble the gearbox, and then reset all of the gears back into their starting position, reassemble it, and put it all back together. Now, that's a pretty complicated way to fix a fairly simple problem. So I kept thinking, this is a pretty common problem that we see a lot. There has to be a better way in order to fix this kind of thing. The solution I came up with was to put a pinion gear on a little shaft with a bearing inside of it so it fits inside of the gearbox, and then all you simply do is put this onto any standard hand drill, and then you can just simply insert it into the gearbox like that and then drive it all the way through its cycle manually without having to disassemble the gun. In order to build one of these, it's pretty simple. All you need is an old burned out motor that still has a good pinion gear on it. You're just going to disassemble it, remove the shaft, the pinion gear, and the bearing, and then just reassemble it in this kind of fashion where you have about a 3mm spacer between the bearing and the pinion gear. That'll give you exactly the right spacing so that when the pinion gear fits up against the bevel gear, it matches up exactly and it can turn it through its cycle. In this case, we've got a clear gearbox with the piston in its rearward position so that you can see what's going on inside of it. To unjam it, all you do is just insert your pinion gear into it and just turn it in a clockwise direction and it'll unjam the gearbox. The other nice thing about having a pinion tool like this is that you can test out a gearbox without having to completely reassemble the gun in order to test it. Normally on an M4 you have to insert the gearbox into the lower receiver, put on the grip, put the motor in it, rewire everything, and put it all back together. With this, all you can do is just take the gearbox out, put it into it, and then you can just simply cycle it through its cycle and make sure that everything works properly. And like I said before, it makes resetting a gearbox very simple without having to completely disassemble the gun. In this situation, we've taken off the upper receiver so that you can see where the piston is inside of it, but normally you wouldn't have to do this. All you'd have to do is simply remove the grip and the motor from the gun, simply insert your pinion tool into it, and then just drive it through its cycle. Just like that. So if you don't think you can build this on your own, feel free to drop us an email to our address at replayairsoft@yahoo.com. We'll be glad to ship one of these out to you. It'll cost $49.95 plus shipping. Or if you got any other questions about airsoft stuff, feel free to drop us a line or stop by the store and we'll see what I can do to help you out. So until then, we'll see you the next time.